Hello, Professors Guernsey and Haymond here. Welcome to another episode of No Free Lunch, Economics for a Fallen World. In a prior episode, or a different video clip, we talked about entrepreneurship. So Dr. Haymond, there are four views, or we can think of it as four economists kind of peeled back different parts of entrepreneurship. Can you start to walk us through those?
Sure. We cover this a little bit in the book because economists have been really interested in entrepreneurship from a long time. Jean-Baptiste Say looked at this, but in modern economics, we began really with the entrepreneur being something that's perhaps the most well known is Joseph Schumpeter's view of creative destruction. In this view of entrepreneurship, and you have to keep in mind where Schumpeter was really, he wrote this book, his major work in 1912 in the heart of the Industrial Revolution. His idea of entrepreneurship was something that would destroy existing modes of operation of business, and it was creative, it would come up with something new. And so in this model, entrepreneurship is really disequilibrating. It's making things worse, but it's going to be a better outcome on the other side. And so that's one view of entrepreneurship that we see from economists. His counterpart on a similar timeline, Ludwig von Mises, had a different function of entrepreneurship. So for von Mises, his view of the entrepreneur was really this idea of the appraisal of valuations. The idea that one would see the value of certain assets. It could be productive inputs. It could be certain output products that could be priced differently in a different application, all sorts of things. Anywhere where there's an opportunity to effectively arbitrage out price differentials in one area, and his protege, which we'll get to in a minute, really highlighted that. But for Mises, he was really someone that was looking at valuations and constantly reacting to any changes in the data. The entrepreneur's obviously very quick to be able to take advantage of changing circumstances. So this entrepreneurial function would be that of appraisal, looking at valuations that are maybe, the previous valuations might be misplaced for where you could apply them today in light of this new information in a more profitable application. Now, Mises had a protege, and I'm going to go ahead to him now. His protege, and took his dissertation under him, was a man named Israel Kirzner. And Kirzner picked up on this appraisal, but went deeper. For Kirzner, it's almost the opposite of what you saw with Schumpeter with his creative destruction. Kirzner had this idea of the alert arbitrageur. The primary function of an entrepreneur was alertness to opportunities. So for Kirzner, there are always opportunities. They're out there just waiting to be discovered. They're there for anybody, but only the entrepreneur is alert enough to see the opportunity that's in front of them. It's like the idea of you walking down the street and there's a $100 bill on the sidewalk. You pick down and you get it. That $100 bill is on the sidewalk already, but nobody else saw it. You did, you picked it up. And so in Kirzner's view, contra what we saw with Joseph Schumpeter with creative destruction, entrepreneurship is always equilibrating. It's always making us further closer to an equilibrium outcome. It's taking things that are not as good as they could be and making them better rather than destroying an existing order. So that's the third way we could look at it. A final way would be kind of the dean of the Chicago School of Economics, Frank Knight. His dissertation, Risk, Uncertainty, and Profit. He made a distinction, which we'll get to in another video, and the difference between risk and uncertainty. But for Knight, the real essence of the entrepreneur was someone that would bear true uncertainty. Because risk effectively could be managed away. You can imagine in a world where every business has to operate with a certain level of risk. Again, we'll get to the definitions in a future video. But in shorthand for Knight, it says, look, if there's an insurance market out there, it's risk. That can be planned for. It can be managed. If there's no insurance product, if it's such a unique event, there's not even an insurance market out there, that's uncertainty. And in that case, the entrepreneur deserves a profit for that above and beyond whatever the normal rate of profit would be in an economy. So that's kind of the way Knight would handle it as well. The reward for entrepreneurship would be profit, and the reason you were justified is because the entrepreneur would go out and go above and beyond those risks that any manager might have to face and solve those problems of true uncertainty. So those are kind of the four famous economists that worked on entrepreneurship, and their different views.
Okay, that's helpful. I'm wondering if we can, as you were talking about that, if we could put feet to those in an example. And let's think of, I was thinking of ride sharing. So Uber or Lyft, 10 years ago, if we'd used one of those words, people would had no idea what we were talking about. We went to, landed at an airport somewhere and we needed a ride, we're going to call a taxi who's licensed or has a medallion or whatever. But that world has changed. So now we have these ride-sharing services. How has that demonstrated creative destruction, appraisal?
That's a great example you asked, Dr. Guernsey. And honestly, I think that, because I love all these great economists, I think you can kind of in some ways see all of them in it. So let's think about how that would be. Obviously, the creative destruction part, the taxi industry is really under a world of hurt. They're under significant pressure, which is why we've had legislative attempts to kind of restrict the ability of Uber to be able to come in there, and Lyft as well, for these things, because the existing capital assets they're gonna lose their value. So there's a little bit of creative destruction, but you could go on the other side of that and say, hey, that opportunity could have been out there for anybody to discover, but somebody was alert enough to see that technology could make and software could make this ride-sharing application and the gig economy a reality. You could get a little bit of Mises in there, the changes in the state of data. You could look at the appraisal of what it costs to get software developed and the cost of cars that are sitting idle in people's houses that are, now can be used as a piece of capital equipment. So that's a way to think about it. And certainly you could even see Frank Knight involved there. There was no model. We couldn't plan the risk or what's the probability that people are going to buy in this. This was stepping out into an unknown future. It's informed by the past, but there was some uncertainty whether people would embrace this gig economy, and they did. And so there was a reward. There has been a profit. Although, interestingly enough, for Lyft and Uber, there's been no profit yet. These are money-losing ventures, which venture capitalists hope one day will pay off. I'm not so sure about that, which is why, if they succeed, they deserve a profit, because it's very uncertain that they will get any profit at all.
Meanwhile, users have benefited from it.
Yeah, consumers have benefited. Consumers love their Uber.
Great, yeah, very good. All right. Well, thanks for unpacking a little bit more about entrepreneurship and those four different parts of it. And thank you for joining us on this episode today.